What up, African world? It's Home Team here, and I'm back at it with another video of African history, culture, and worldview. And today, we're going to talk about the top 5 rebellious African ethnic groups during slavery. And as always, if you want to support the Home Team, you can do so on patreon.com. I have some new rewards for you guys, so be sure to check that out. Also, go to Afrographics.com, a website where you can find unique illustrative infographics summarizing African history. All links to Patreon, Afrographics, and Home Team merchandise are in the description box below. The truth is, all African ethnic groups who were enslaved during the Atlantic slave trade at one point practiced some form of resistance, whether it be in a traditional form, economic, or even spiritual. It would be a shame if we ignored some of the more numerous African ethnic groups who were enslaved in droves, like the Yoruba and the Igbo peoples. So I'll mention them here. Although their slave rebellions are lesser known, it's still worthy of note. For example, the Malay slave rebellion in Bahia, Brazil by Muslim Yorubas who were inspired by the Haitian Revolution, Ahunu, the proposed leader, being of Yoruba stock. Also, we have to mention a more non-traditional route of rebellion taken by enslaved Igbos called the Igbo Landing, in which dozens of Igbos drowned themselves, refusing to be enslaved. The Igbos specifically were known by planters and slavers of the American South for being resistant to slavery. Numerous Igbos during the Igbo Landing apparently followed a high Igbo chief walking in unison into a creek, reportedly singing in their language, "The water spirit brought us. The water spirit will take us home." They acknowledged and relied on the spiritual protection of their god, Chukwu, and chose death over enslavement. This was a unique moment in African American history and was of great symbolic importance to African American folklore. Even Beyonce honored the Igbo resistance to slavery in her video, Love Drought, as a procession of black women are seen in long robes entering the water. With that being said, let's get into the top 5 African ethnic groups who rebelled during slavery. It's important to note that this list is composed of African ethnic groups who consistently played leadership roles in slave uprisings, and we're not just talking about physical leadership, but spiritual and cultural as well. When it comes to revolutions and rebellions, we have to understand that the spiritual component is huge. I personally would say that about 80% of all slave rebellions, if not more, were spiritual in nature, or at least evoked some spiritual energy. This list also takes into consideration the history of various ethnic groups and their resistance to colonialism, so remember to keep that in mind as well. Coming in at number 5, we have the Mundu people. The Mundu people were from modern-day Angola, and they dwelled in various vassal states of the larger Congo Empire. Many of them were captured as war captives and were already trained in fighting and warfare. The Mbunu make our list because of their impactful cultural leadership and contribution to slave rebellion. Many Mbundu were enslaved in Brazil, where they advanced their fighting style, Ngolo, and transformed it into capoeira. Capoeira evolved to suit the needs and concerns of those Africans in the region, as the Mbundu taught other Africans how to protect themselves from colonial authorities if they had no weapons. This martial art was one of the primary tools Africans used in Brazil to ward off the Portuguese as they made their way to reach Maroon communities, and this spirit of rebellion from the Mbundu has been ingrained into the very fabric of Brazilian culture. For number 4, we have the Mandinka people. According to most history books, the overwhelming majority of enslaved Africans were war captives, and the Mandinka exemplify this reality due to the fact that they were well known to be warriors. Hence, the popular term Mandingo warrior has made it into American vernacular. Even popular TV shows with characters such as Kunta Kinte and his resistant spirit was put on display for the world to see. Within Africa itself, the Mandinka made a lot of noise when it came to resisting colonialism. Samori Toure of a related ethnic group comes to mind with his resistance to French colonialism. But there was another Mandinka leader who resisted and rebelled. He's sometimes known as King Bayano. King Bayano led the largest and one of the earliest rebellions against Spanish colonial rule in Panama during the 16th century. Bayano was a Mandinka Muslim who was apparently very good looking according to Spanish accounts. Simply because of his looks and strong stature, the Spanish assumed he must have been a ruler back in his home, and so they called him El Rey Negro Bayano, or the Black King Bayano. King Bayano lived up to his name, as he led hundreds of other enslaved people against the Spanish for 5 years. Bayano was politically savvy, as he even gained support from English and Scottish pirates. The Spanish could not conquer King Bayano in the traditional sense, so they used deceit to draw him out via a false peace treaty. However, the Spanish respected King Bayano so much that they didn't even kill him, but they sent him to Spain, where he lived in relative comfort due to the wealth he amassed. Even his followers retained their freedom. His spirit of rebellion alone was so powerful that it literally set him and his followers free. Breaking our top 3, we have the Fawn people. First, we have to acknowledge the courage and resistance of the Dahomey Amazons, who were from the Fawn ethnic group. The Fawn spirit of courage and resistance to domination has been honored and romanticized in popular culture, especially amongst the French soldiers who fought them. The outside world became aware of the Dahomey Amazons largely through French interaction. After the French and their African allies, the Senegalese, Hausa, and Yoruba, all rallied to conquer the Fawn state of Dahomey, they venerated the all-female fighting battalion, proclaiming that the African Amazons gave proof of incredible courage and audacity. The French even went as far to say that their fiercest, most determined adversaries were the Amazons. Aside from the fantastic Fawn legacy of resistance in Africa, they continued their resistance in spiritual form in Haiti. The Fawn religion of Vodun created Haitian voodoo, as many Fawn people were enslaved in Haiti. The Fawn people's spiritual form led the way as they prepared themselves for rebellion. Vodun was one of the key factors in the Haitian Revolution, as a voodoo ceremony took place before they conquered the land. Even though the French conquered Fawn territory in Africa, ironically, the spirit of rebellion amongst the Fawn eventually went out against the French in Haiti. Coming in at number 2, we have the Congo people. The Bakongo were one of the primary African ethnic groups who were enslaved during the Atlantic slave trade. They were among the first to protest slavery via letters in the 16th century, and they became one of the most active ethnic groups in efforts to decolonize Africa. Bakongo influence in rebellions and revolutions was seemingly everywhere in North and South America. In North America, the Stono Rebellion was led by the spirit of the Bakongo in South Carolina during the 18th century. 20 slaves broke into a store, stole weapons, and headed in the direction of Florida, where under Spanish law they would be free. They grew in number, and as they marched, they shouted Lukongo, which is a word that embodied liberty in their native Bakongo language. This Bakongo-led rebellion was significant because it was the largest and one of the greatest slave rebellions that was ever staged in the 13 colonies. Another brilliant slave rebellion led by the Bakongo was the Gangazumba Rebellion. Gangazumba was the first leader of a large runaway slave settlement in Brazil. He was an enslaved African who escaped enslavement on a sugar plantation and literally created his own kingdom. This tremendous achievement gave him the title Gangazumba, said to mean Great Lord. Ganga was reportedly African royalty, as he was the son of a princess from the Congo Empire of the Congo People. During warfare with the Portuguese, he was captured as a prisoner and sent to Brazil. There, he helped to form maroon communities of former enslaved Africans in Brazil, which later formed into a well-organized kingdom. This Bakongo royal led the resistance and became a king in his own right, leading one of the greatest slave rebellions in Brazil. And coming in at number 1, we have the Ashanti. The Ashanti, even on African soil, were very resistant to colonialism and achieved varying levels of success. In fact, British colonialism in Ashanti territory was ignored for quite some time, as the British tried to assert control over the region. The Ashanti took their spirit of rebellion with them and led 3 prominent rebellions in the Americas. They maintained a consistent presence in leadership during African resistance to slavery. In Jamaica, the Ashanti became the preeminent ethnic group known for rebellion. They were called the Coromantes. These Ashanti leaders organized many slave rebellions in Jamaica. Another slave rebellion was led by an Ashanti man named Kofi. In the Berbice slave rebellion of Guyana, Kofi led a rebellion with other enslaved Africans, organizing them into a military unit. It's reported that over 2,500 Africans joined him in his efforts. This Ashanti leader and his uprising are seen as a major event in Guyana's history, and February 23rd is remembered as a day to commemorate his legacy. Yet another rebellion led by the Ashanti was in November 1733 by a group of warrior Ashantis who plotted against their Danish overlords. The Ashanti took over the island of St. John's for 6 months until it was finally put down with aid from French and Swiss troops. The spirit of rebellion and resistance amongst the Ashanti cannot be denied, and this spirit has a long and extensive history not only in Africa but in the Americas as well, as the Ashanti went on to lead several slave rebellions across the Afro-descended world. Well, I'm all out, guys. If you like these videos and want to help out in its continued production, you can do so on patreon.com. The link is in the description box below. Know thyself. Remember your ancestors. Peace.